All right, and here we go. So I was able to find a pretty low ELO game here. So between Full Metal Bitch in blue here playing the Spanish. On the other side is Dirk.Hoffmeisterl and 29 ELO here playing the Mongols. So this one popped out, one because of the name, of course, but also Four Lakes is a fun one, especially at lower ELOs, and hopefully they'll end up scouting the water here. But that's a big one just to boost your economy early on, as you want to get a dock down pretty quickly and start getting those fish going. So down at 29 ELO, it's hard to know really what to expect. First off, though, it's tough having over a minute of idle TC time by 3 minutes into the game. So that's definitely one of the biggest ones is, as you're creating your villagers, have them go straight to a resource. Number two is if you're having troubles there, I mentioned before, but you can always just queue several villagers at a time instead of waiting for the TC to idle to then queue. That's an easy way to get down throughout the entirety of the game is if you have early TC idle time, then that's a lot of extra villager working time that you're missing out on. So not too bad, especially because blue is already about a minute of idle TC time as well. So, no loon yet on either. One thing here is you always want to get the lumber camp first instead of the mill. Now there's not enough wood for a lumber camp, and so you have your villagers taking all the straggler trees, which is, it's not too bad, but it's also nice to save those straggler trees for later on in the game. And this is not an ideal lumber camp because, one, you're going to have these villagers running all the way over here to work, and then it was scouted, so you should see how small and ineffective this will actually be. There's not a whole lot of trees directly adjacent to this lumber camp. It's going to get inefficient pretty quickly, and it's also harder to defend the villagers. So usually you want to just, well, one, of course, go to the larger wood line if you have a noticeably larger one, and then two, one that's closer to the TC. So right here would have been the ideal lumber camp spot. And another thing, so blue took the boars, which is great. Red is going to want to take the boars. That's 680 food you're missing out on, so that's a pretty huge deal, especially because you collect that food so much more quickly than other food sources. And then neither of them have gone for the deer. That's a tougher one, especially at this ELO, but if you're not comfortable pushing the deer, that's actually a better spot to drop your mill. If you're going to do an early mill, I would prefer just dropping the mill right here so you can grab all the deer. Yeah, the deer are great. That's another 560 food that comes in very quickly. Great base setup from blue so far. It's turning into a natural wall here. Really good lumber camp. Didn't really have much more of an option, honestly. The other wood lines are terrible for blue here. And the idle TC time is getting pretty drastic, especially for blue here, actually. So 3.5 minutes of idle TC time is quite a bit. You know, villagers 25 seconds to create, so 3.5 minutes of idle TC time is it's almost like 8 villagers of missing out there. Okay, looks like red just scouted blue. Got the scout out without dying, that's great. And blue has not scouted much, so standard just circular scouting path here. If you're not going to use the scout, that's actually a good tip here, is just to throw that scout on auto scout, especially at this ELO. I mean, I wouldn't, it's a good way to get vision without having to think about it. It was a nice addition getting an auto scout, especially for this level. And it looks like this is auto scout as well, just with the movements there. So red's got a whole lot of vision. You can kind of see that with the score, especially, you know, blue has 500 more res collected. They have about the same villager count, same eco bonuses so far. All that score difference is basically just due to the scouting itself. So now it looks like blue is scouting. That still looks like the same circular path. So again, that's a lot of clicking just to manage having your scout run in a circle. If you're going to do that anyways and not directly scout where the opponent may be, it's better to go on auto scout. And this is interesting. Kind of a strange tower out there, especially without loom. And here comes another unloomed villager. So we'll see how that goes. Most likely gonna die, and blue clicks the tower. So if that happens, you don't want to click on the tower, it'll auto attack it. So the scout is not actually hitting that villager there, which still has no loom. And just one hit on the villager and they run away. So we'll see what happens there. Blue's gonna have an incredible advantage in castle though, that's much faster. And another tower. Should be a pretty fun situation on the map here. Alright, let's see if blue decides to castle drop this random tower in the middle of nowhere. You know, blue has only scouted that, so he probably thinks that red's TC is maybe right here where this gold is. I would think it would be right there if I saw this tower. It is pretty random having the TC way over there. Just opting to do a safer castle. That's a still great defensive castle, honestly, because it blocks this whole side of the entrance of your base. This side's already walled, so really now if you just want to wall this, then you're going to be pretty defended. Res collected is pretty even. And blue has cleaned up the idle TC time a lot, so only 1 second of idle TC time added since the beginning of feudal. So really clean that up, nice work. I think the the reason that happened is because there's currently 7 villagers in queue, actually for both now. But yeah, again, I mean, if you're not going to be using the res anyways, especially at this ELO, it's harder to spend the res as soon as you get it, then overqueuing villagers is fine. It's better to have more villagers than not producing. So a little bit inefficient there to send your whole farming eco to build a TC on the other side of the wood line just to run back. If you're going to do that and you're low on food but have a lot of wood, it's probably better to just send the wood bills over there to do that and then just leave them there to cut wood. That's a pretty minor thing. Okay, we have a wall coming up from red here. That's going to be a fun one. Not a bad TC. Wooden protects the gold as well. I'm pretty shocked that red still hasn't taken this wood line, the actual main wood line. Most buildings, of course, at this ELO are always going to be placed up against the wall somewhere, so it's out of the way. And maybe that's a great start here for a first tip for Dirk is you can use your buildings as a wall. So that's a much better use of your resources, is to wall with your buildings instead of throwing them in the back. And now you're either going to be completely open at the front, or like probably what's about to happen is you're going to be spending a ton of stone or a ton of wood creating dedicated walls instead of just using buildings you always have to build anyways. Huh. Okay, a TC on a single straggler tree. That's interesting. And neither of them have a single dock. So it kind of evens out, but I mean, that's kind of a general tip for both. And anyone on a water map, especially on 4 lakes where it's such a safe pond for you to get a bunch of fish, this is just a great spot to drop a dock. They both have enough wood to do that. I know that's probably just too much to think about at this ELO. And missionaries is not the right choice of unit here. I don't think I've ever seen someone sub 300 ELO able to use monks anywhere near effectively, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe this is just for fun because they recently got the buffs, and you can see maybe the wrong upgrades coming in. Forging and then vodka arrow on the Spanish is an interesting call because they don't get anything past archers. So kind of a weird mix of upgrades here. At least vodka helps the castles quite a bit. And another one going up here. Usually with Spanish, you're going to want to go conchs, especially lower elos. Conchs are so deadly, and they're so easy to use because you can have them in low numbers. They do plenty of damage. Yeah, missionaries are good if you can use them. And especially if you're going to be putting them out this early, I would definitely focus down all the relics. So we got one grab in the relics, which is still fine. Maybe they haven't, yeah, I haven't actually scouted the others, so that makes sense. So nice work getting 3 relics there. And like we mentioned, now red is spending a ton of time and a ton of stone putting up a full wall. Instead of, you know, this would probably do the same, just having these houses all throughout. Love to see that. That is a very safe monk grabbing that relic. Nice work. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, red was a little particular with the base setup. You know, all the military buildings go here, all the non-military buildings go back there. You have towers and castles in the front with stone walls. So honestly, I think red has a great idea of how to play the game. There's just a couple of things missing. Really good army as well. 54 army is insane for this point in the game. And this is where I think a lot of people at the lower elos struggle, is they're not really sure when to move out, or they're so used to being beaten down, especially down at 29 elo. That's a whole lot of games lost. So at this point, a lot of people I think are just used to being attacked and losing, and so you're going for a whole bunch of counter defensive units. You're never really thinking about pushing, especially when you've seen the whole map. You see these 2 castles here. One thing that I would do is, if you have this much army, you're full stone walled, and you have now 2 castles right on the front, you have a gate here. I would send your 65 army now out to the side and see what you have over here. 65 army in the back of his base right now would end the game, of course, but red doesn't know that. So I'll maybe add that as another tip here for Dirk, is if you have a full wall and defenses, move out with army. On blue side, it's been fine. I'm still not sure about this. So one thing is, blue is only using 1 TC to actually produce villagers. I don't know if this TC has ever produced anything, same as this one. And they're both in awkward positions. So I would say if you're going to be expanding with TCs, make sure you're putting those in better locations. And yeah, if the skirm there, that would have been a pretty solid clear. But now with Onager, this is going to be really tough to push, which is trash. And wow, yeah, the KD is not looking great. But luckily, red is great with producing military. Still at 43 after losing, you know, 62 military there. So if you see this, a whole bunch of siege and then conchs. I think that red still could have won that, but yeah, it's pretty tough, especially up against this much siege and the conchs there. If you're just going skirms and spears, I see that some of the cavalier were queued. That would be a great call. So if the cavalier were in here at the same time as the skirms, the cavalier would be able to snipe all the siege while your skirms just focus down the conchs. That's obviously easier said than done. So yeah, on red side, I think using the buildings again as a wall, that way you can get a little bit earlier defenses. Most likely down at this ELO, you've gotten to that point because you've been attacked so many times early on that now you're seeing the adaptation by red is just to throw stone walls everywhere and throw down early towers and all the castles and everything. And then 0 attacking decisions. It's all about defensive spears and skirms. So yeah, I would use these buildings that you're going to be building anyways, just along the wall. Great way to get the early defense. And then of course, after you full walled, like he had a full wall here, I would just send your 65 army that you had around to the side. And at least that pulls the focus away from the center area. For blue, I think it was just about expanding with TCs, put them on valuable resources. So yeah, both of the TCs that were dropped here were, awkward positions, and then they were actually never used. So still queuing out of 1. And so with that being the case, I would say the next one is learn select all TC hotkey. And if you can figure out that hotkey for how you want to select all TCs, oops, here we go. Trying to fix that later. If you can figure out how to select all TCs, then that's a great way to start producing out of all of those buildings. The issue that we were seeing here is just, of course, that, here we go, that's fine. Only 1 TC producing, so the idle TC time is crazy here. Yeah, overall, decent game. Red had the right idea, getting walls down, getting a whole bunch of military out, so very defended there, but fell into a trap of just going with spears and skirms into siege.